like to welcome on our next guest, Kevin Robertson. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much.
Good to have you join us, Kevin, as always. Give our audience, before we kind of jump into these DOL fiduciary standards and their impact on HSAs, give us a little background on HSA Bank for our audience, please.
Sure. So obviously HSA Bank is one of the largest HSA and notional product custodians in the United States, serving several million customers, about $5 billion in HSA assets. Long time early entrants into the HSA marketplace and have always been a leader in the market space. And we are domiciled in essentially in Wisconsin, although our parent corporation, which is Webster Bank, is domiciled in Connecticut. So we are part of a larger entity, but we have many of about 500 employees in and near the Wisconsin marketplace, and then spread out all over the United States.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Kevin, help us understand the 600 pages of these new DOL regulations that came out earlier this year, and their impact on HSAs. So what are these new and fiduciary standards? Why do they exist, and what's the impact on HSAs?
Sure, absolutely, yeah. Right now, we're really just trying to make sure everyone understands, really what the fiduciary standards are, and really the fact that they do impact HSAs. I think it's caught a lot of people by surprise because it's not something that they would have maybe normally thought or been aware of what the regulations were. So why don't we start there and talk a little bit about what the guidance is. So the Department of Labor issued guidance in April, and it really was about 5 years in the making. This is something that's been on the DOL's to-do list, as well as a top objective of the Obama administration. Originally, the fiduciary standards and guidelines were designed to curb what I guess I'll call were questionable practices by investment advisors, really on retirement plans, putting essentially their own, we'll say, income needs ahead of their clients' best interests, and painting all sorts of bad pictures of investors, unsavory investors taking advantage of little old ladies in their retirement plans. I mean, that's really the genesis of it. But the DOL sought to really broaden the spectrum of what the rules were and what types of plans that they impact. So the rules, all 600 pages of them, really kind of focus on a couple of core areas. Number one is either new or clarified definitions around several concepts, such as fiduciary and what constitutes investment advice and recommendations, and really expands the second component is expanding the concept of fiduciary responsibilities, and for the first time requiring a much broader spectrum of entities that were not previously considered to be fiduciaries, making them fiduciaries, and then ultimately saying what they have to do to comply with the guidelines. In that vein, additionally, HSAs were caught up in this because you, again, would think that HSAs are not a retirement vehicle. Well, because of the investment aspects and long-term saving aspects of HSAs and other similar products, quite honestly, the new regulations now extend to pension and 401k plans, retirement vehicles, of course, things like IRAs, but even extend now to health savings accounts, the old Archer MSAs, even Coverdell savings accounts. Really, any of those plans, they all have now fallen under the guise of the DOL fiduciary responsibilities.
So what is that impact? I mean, they're under the guidelines. So what does that mean to we out there, the employers offering this plan and others? What does it mean?
Sure. I mean, really it is. At first glance, you'd probably think that it's really not that big of a change. And in the grand scheme of things, this is not an issue where the sky is falling or it's going to be tremendously, burdensome to the employer. But bottom line is, for the first time, employers' responsibilities, the core relationship of an employer's responsibility towards their employees for both their retirement vehicles and, in addition to that, health savings account changes. And not only do the administrators have to make sure that they're complying, to make sure that, for instance, the educational resources and communication resources that they're deploying, don't cross the line and make certain recommendations or provide investment advice, or that they're essentially acting in the best interest in a fiduciary capacity and acting in the best interest of the account holders, but also that is requiring the employers that previously could have a kind of a hands-off approach, now is saying, oh no, Mr. or Ms. Employer, you now have the responsibility of managing and making sure that your plans are compliant, and the vendors that you select and utilize are also compliant in that same vein. So there are some things that an employer is going to have to do to comply, as well as there are some things that the banks and custodians are going to have to do to try and look and make sure that the way that they're impacting and the way that they're touching the customers is in full compliance with the regulations. I'll give you an example of some potential impacts that may be necessary. First of all, not only do the administrators but also the employers that are hiring those administrators need to make sure that the fees being charged to participants within their programs are appropriate and fully disclosed. The disclosure piece is really a big thing that is really, you're going to notice it probably more than anything else, where disclosure level is going to go up dramatically. That is for a foregone conclusion. That is absolutely going to happen. Reviewing, for instance, like I said, education and communication materials, and making sure that what they're deploying doesn't cross that line that constitute an advice or a recommendation. And under the new guidelines, a lot of the guidelines was around that concept of really trying to provide clearer definitions of really what is investment advice and what does constitute a recommendation. Potentially, there might be some changes that either an administrator or an employer might need to make to their investment offerings within their products to make sure that they're being offered and structured in the best interest of the employees and the participants. And quite honestly, there might be either new contracts or at least certain addendums that employers might need to have with vendors to make sure that they're ensuring and understand the processes involved, that their vendors that they're selecting to use for whatever services, whether it be on a 401k provider or an HSA custodian, is in full compliance as well too. So there are some things that are going to have to occur here.
Yeah, is this now, Kevin? Is the timing now, or when is the timing of these new regs?
Sure. So, technically the regulations are already in effect. They became in effect 60 days essentially after when they were first brought forth in April. However, that even though we're essentially everyone's already subject to the rules, there's some key dates with regard to formal compliance with the rules. The first date that you need to be mindful of is April 10th, 2017, and that's really where the conduct and disclosure requirement compliance is required. So in other words, everyone needs to be conducting themselves in the appropriate fashion, disclosing the fees and the structures and so on and so forth. All of that compliance is necessary by next April. And then January 1st, 2018 is when quote-unquote full compliance takes effect, and that's really where you need to make sure that, obviously the best interest contract standards and so on and so forth, full compliance with everything that's in the regulations. Now, one of the things to be mindful of here is a potential for either changes or delays to the rules. These rules are quite honestly, they impact a lot more than just HSAs. HSAs were caught in this net, but this is wide sweeping changes that impact a lot of business and a lot of advisors. As such, it's quite a contentious issue and political football, I'll call it. So already you've seen from Congress attempts to change or kill the regulations. The president vetoed those, and I don't see that changing until the next president is elected, whoever it may be. So that may have an impact on this, as well as there have been a number of lawsuits. I think the last time I looked, 5 major lawsuits that have been filed in various federal courts that are challenging either the DOL's their ability, their jurisdiction to essentially assert this authority, or in seeking changes or delaying implementation of the rules as well too. So it's definitely something that everyone's going to be mindful of, is that there are strong efforts to in opposition to try and impact, delay, or change these regulations, and there could be some fallout for that. So it's something to keep in mind.
It's one of the biggest challenges right now, too, Kevin. It's why we're talking today, and I know you guys are doing a lot of heavy lifting around your white paper and other things, is that it's just awareness to all these moving parts, and awareness to, to what employers and advisors, others need to be cognizant of, what this all entails.
Yes, absolutely, and you have to remember that this is something new. This is not like this was existing guidance that's been tweaked a little bit. There are certain concepts here, especially extending or expanding the spectrum of who is a fiduciary and what their responsibilities may entail. They've never had rules that captured employers' responsibilities in such a fashion as this. So it's going to take a little time of adjustment, and quite frankly, what we're seeing in our own business, and as well as I think what's going on in the entire HSA industry, as well as really, again, because this is something that far greater reaching than just HSAs, in the retirement and advisory capacity as well. The banks and the mutual fund companies and the investment advisors, everyone is quite honestly still evaluating how to comply. In the 600 pages of regulations, it says you must comply, but it doesn't tell you exactly how to comply, right? So, I know that, for instance, we just about every other major bank in the United States and financial entities have, engaged outside counsels that are, specifically experts in ERISA and DOL regulation as well, to try and make sure that we are in compliance, but also that we help our customers be in compliance as well too. So a lot of the banks and admins are quite honestly still working through exactly what the regs and the processes are. But in the meantime, the employers at bare minimum, they really should do a couple things. Number one, realize that, hey, the sky is not falling, okay? There's going to be some work that they're going to have to do, and at minimum they need to make sure that they're engaging their vendors and seeking some help from outside counsel. Especially remember that this touches their retirement plans as well as their HSAs. So again, there's multiple impacts or potential impacts to employers and plan sponsors here. But that ultimately that hey, we'll get through this, and we'll be able to comply. It's just a matter of what do we need to do and the steps that we need to make sure to cross the T's and dot the I's. And that's just a little bit of work and time that will happen undoubtedly through the rest of the summer and into the fall, heading into 2017. Other than that, they need to make sure that they're watching for delays and changes, and quite honestly, just having those conversations on a going forward basis and being mindful of, hey, things may change or may get impacted.
But then HSA Bank will be there in a service capacity to really help your clients with this knowledge and education and help them through this process too, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously the spectrum of what we can help them with is limited to obviously the products that we're talking about, for instance, in HSAs here, and again, they're going to have to seek help on for instance 401k. If they offer 401k or 403b or 457s or whatever it may be. But ultimately, absolutely, again, we're here as a resource to help our clients. One of the things, too, if somebody would like to have a little bit more information on the front end of this issue, just to understand a little bit deeper about the background and overview and potential impact on employers and advisors in that, we actually have a white paper that was released, I believe, about a week ago, and the white paper, does a pretty good job just trying to outline a little bit more in depth of what the regulations are and keeps, again, raising the awareness. And people can get that white paper for free off of our website. There's two easy ways to find it. If they go to our website at hsabank.com, in the upper right-hand side there's a search bar, and if they just type DOL in the search, it actually comes up up with the press release, and a link to the white paper is in that press release, and it's the very first link. Or if they want to, they can just go directly to hsabank.com/DOL-fiduciary-standards, and that'll bring you right to where they can pick up the white paper for free and at least give them some information and background as well.
Yeah, that's a great place to end, Kevin. A great place to leave our audience with that thought and where to download that white paper. It's been great having you on the program. We'll have to have you again real soon. I look forward to catching up with you personally in the near future. But thank you so much for today.
Absolutely. You guys have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Kevin. Take care.